The dinner party was in full swing, crystal glasses clinking as Seattle's elite mingled in my former mother-in-law's mansion. I shouldn't have been there. Technically, I wasn't even invited. But when your company caters the most exclusive events in the city, you sometimes end up in interesting situations. Olivia, darling. Margaret Wellington's voice cut through the crowd. You simply must try these divine crab cakes. They're from Milano's, of course. Not like that dreadful catering service my ex-daughter-in-law runs. I kept my focus on arranging the dessert display, fighting back a smile. If Margaret only knew that both the dreadful catering service and her precious Milanos were owned by the same person. Me. My name is Sofia Chen. And 3 years ago, I committed the unforgivable sin of divorcing Margaret's precious son, William. Not because of any scandal or drama, but simply because we grew apart. I wanted to build something of my own. He wanted a wife who'd be content hosting charity luncheons and looking pretty at board meetings. What the Wellingtons never knew was that I'd been building my empire long before the divorce. The catering company was just the visible part, my testing ground for new recipes and concepts. Behind the scenes, I'd been quietly acquiring and transforming struggling restaurants across the city. Milano's had been my first major acquisition. I kept the name but completely revamped the menu and operations, turning a failing Italian restaurant into the hottest chain in the Pacific Northwest. Not that anyone knew I owned it. All the paperwork was under my holding company's name. Sofia, Jenny, my assistant, appeared at my elbow. The kitchen needs you. There's an issue with the soufflés. I nodded, grateful for the excuse to step away from Margaret's voice. In the kitchen, my team worked with practiced efficiency, but I could see the tension in their shoulders. They'd all heard Margaret's comments throughout the night. Listen up, I said, gathering them around. I know this isn't easy, but remember, we're not just here to serve food. We're here to prove a point. Maria, my head chef, raised an eyebrow. Are you finally going to tell her? Not yet. I adjusted my chef's coat, but soon, very soon. The truth was, I'd been planning this moment for months. Margaret's campaign to blacklist my catering company from Seattle's social circle had actually done me a favor. It had pushed me to expand faster, think bigger. While she was busy badmouthing my little business, I'd been building a restaurant empire worth over $50 million. My phone buzzed. A text from William. Saw you in the kitchen. We should talk. I ignored it. William had been trying to talk ever since he found out I'd bought his favorite steakhouse last month. Not that he knew I owned it. He just wanted to complain about the menu changes. Mrs. Wellington is asking for more of the Milano's signature sauce, Jenny reported, returning from the dining room. She's telling everyone it's a secret family recipe that no other restaurant could possibly replicate. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. That sauce was my grandmother's recipe, the same one Margaret had once called too ethnic for her dinner parties. Through the kitchen doors, I could hear her holding court. Really, it's about standards. Some people, she shot a pointed look toward the kitchen, simply don't understand the level of excellence required in our circle. That's why I only trust Milano's for my important events. I checked my watch. In exactly 2 weeks, Margaret would be hosting the annual Wellington Family Foundation Gala, the biggest social event of the season. She'd been bragging about having Milano's cater it for months. What she didn't know was that I had a surprise planned for that night. One that would finally show her exactly who she'd been underestimating all these years. Sofia, Jenny appeared again. The lawyer called. Everything's set for next week's board meeting. I nodded. The pieces were falling into place. Perfect. And the documents I asked for. All here. She handed me a thick folder. Are you sure about this timing? Absolutely. I started reviewing the papers. Margaret Wellington has spent 3 years trying to destroy my reputation in this city. It's time she learned who really runs things around here. The week before the Wellington Gala was a blur of meetings and preparations. I sat in my downtown office, reviewing the final documents for what I was about to do. The view of Puget Sound stretched out before me, gray waves matching my contemplative mood. The board meeting for Milano's is confirmed for tomorrow, Jenny said, setting a coffee on my desk. Margaret Wellington still thinks it's just a routine quarterly review. I smiled, picking up the latest financial reports. Under my ownership, Milano's had grown from 3 struggling locations to 15 thriving restaurants across the Pacific Northwest. And now I was about to merge it with my other holdings, creating one of the largest restaurant groups in the region. My phone buzzed. William again. Mother's frantic about the gala menu. She says no one at Milano's is returning her calls. What's going on, Sofia? I ignored it, just like I'd ignored his last dozen messages. Let him worry. The intercom buzzed. Ms. Chen, your 2 o'clock is here. The Milano's executive team. Send them in. 6 people filed into my office, all looking nervous. They'd been running Milano's day-to-day operations while I remained the silent owner. Only they knew who really signed their paychecks. As you know, I began tomorrow's board meeting will announce some significant changes. I want to make sure we're all clear on how this will play out. I laid out the plan, watching their faces as they realized what was about to happen. The merger would make headlines, especially given who would be affected. Mrs. Wellington, my CFO, said carefully, she'll be there tomorrow? Oh yes. I leaned back in my chair. As a special guest. After all, she's our most vocal supporter. Later that evening, as I was leaving the office, I ran into exactly the person I'd been avoiding. William stood by the elevator, his expensive suit a reminder of the life I'd left behind. Sofia, he said, stepping forward. We need to talk. About what, William? How your mother's been trying to destroy my business, or about how you've done nothing to stop her? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Look, you know how mother gets. But these changes at Milano's, they're causing her real distress. She's planned this gala for months, and it will be perfectly catered, I assured him. Just maybe not quite the way she expects. His eyes narrowed. What are you planning? You'll find out tomorrow, along with everyone else. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my power suit, Chanel, black, impeccable. Margaret wasn't the only one who knew how to make an impression. The Milano's boardroom was filled by the time I arrived. Margaret sat near the front, radiating self-importance. She'd been invited as a valued customer to provide feedback on recent changes. She didn't even look at me as I walked in. The chairman stood to begin the meeting. Before we discuss regular business, we have a special announcement. Over the past 3 years, Milano's has undergone significant transformation under new ownership. Today, we're announcing a merger that will create the largest restaurant group in the Pacific Northwest. Margaret perked up, probably already planning how to brag about her connection to such a prestigious company. I'd like to introduce the owner who has guided this transformation, Ms. Sofia Chen. The silence was absolute as I walked to the podium. Margaret's face went through a fascinating series of expressions. Confusion, disbelief, and finally horror. This is impossible, she sputtered. She runs a catering company. Actually, I smiled. I run several businesses. The catering company, Milano's, and as of today, the new Chen restaurant group, which will include 28 locations across 3 states. I clicked to the next slide, showing the combined revenue figures. Margaret's face had gone pale. Of course, I continued. This merger means some changes in how we operate. For instance, we'll be reviewing all our regular client relationships, ensuring they align with our company values. Margaret stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. You planned this. All of it. Planned what? I asked innocently. To build a successful business. Yes, I did. To watch you praise my restaurants while trying to destroy my catering company. That was just an amusing bonus. The night of the Wellington Gala arrived clear and cold. I stood in the kitchen of the Four Seasons ballroom, watching my team prepare what would be a very special menu. After the board meeting revelation, Margaret had tried desperately to cancel Milano's catering contract for the gala. But ironically, the same ironclad contracts she'd always praised them for now worked against her. Breaking it this late would have meant hefty penalties and, more importantly, social embarrassment. Everything's ready, Maria announced, putting the finishing touches on the appetizers. Should we serve them exactly as planned? I smiled, adjusting my chef's coat. Tonight, instead of hiding in the kitchen, I would be front and center. Exactly as planned. Let's show Seattle what we can really do. The ballroom was filled with the city's elite, all drawn by the Wellington family name. Margaret stood by the entrance, greeting guests with a fixed smile that looked more like a grimace. When she saw me emerge from the kitchen in my pristine chef's coat with Executive Chef, Chen Restaurant Group embroidered in gold, her smile cracked completely. What are you doing? She hissed as I approached. You can't be out here. Actually, I can. It's in the contract. The executive chef personally oversees all premium events. I gestured to the approaching servers. Ah, here come the appetizers. I believe you'll recognize them. The servers presented trays of elegantly plated bites, all signature dishes from Milano's, but with subtle twists that elevated them further. These are Milano's recipes, Margaret protested. You can't. They're my recipes, I corrected her gently. Every dish you've praised at Milano's for the past 3 years. They were all mine. That secret family sauce you love so much? My grandmother's recipe. The color drained from her face as guests began sampling the food, exclaiming over the familiar yet enhanced flavors. Oh, Margaret, one of her society friends called out. These are even better than usual. Did Milano's get a new chef? Before Margaret could respond, I stepped forward. Actually, I'm the chef who's been developing Milano's menu for the past 3 years. Sofia Chen, executive chef and CEO of the Chen Restaurant Group. The woman's eyes widened with recognition. Chen, weren't you? William's wife? Yes. Now I'm just the owner of his favorite restaurants. I turned to Margaret. Would you like me to explain how that spicy crab sauce is made? It's a family recipe after all, just not your family. She opened her mouth to respond but was interrupted by William's arrival. He looked between us, taking in the situation. Sophia, he said carefully, could we talk privately? I considered refusing, but curiosity won out. We stepped into a quiet corner of the ballroom. You've made your point, he said. You've humiliated Mother thoroughly. What more do you want? I laughed softly. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about humiliation. It's about truth. For 3 years, your mother has tried to destroy my reputation, all while unknowingly praising my work. I'm just finally taking credit for what's mine. The merger announcement has already affected our family's standing. Your family's standing? I interrupted. What about my livelihood? The contracts your mother cost me. The lies she spread? He had the grace to look ashamed. I should have stopped her. Yes, you should have. But you didn't, and now here we are. I gestured to the room where guests were enthusiastically enjoying my food. I've built something remarkable, William, with or without the Wellington name. The evening continued, a masterclass in elegant revenge. Each course revealed another Milano's favorite, each presentation more spectacular than the last. Margaret was forced to watch as guest after guest praised the chef she'd spent years denigrating. The final blow came during dessert, as my team served my signature tiramisu, the same one Margaret had once declared the height of culinary sophistication. I clinked my glass for attention. I want to thank the Wellington Family Foundation for this opportunity, I announced to the room. In honor of tonight's event, the Chen Restaurant Group will be donating all proceeds from this evening to culinary education scholarships for underprivileged youth. The applause was thunderous. Margaret looked like she swallowed something sour. After all, what could be worse than her nemesis receiving a standing ovation at her own gala? Later that night, as the last guest departed, I found William waiting by the kitchen. You know, he said quietly, I always wondered why you chose restaurants over our life together. It wasn't about the restaurants, William. It was about being seen for who I am, not just who I married. I started to walk past him, then paused. Your mother's sauce that you love so much, it's on the menu at my new bistro downtown. Feel free to stop by, if you can handle knowing who really makes it. 6 months later, the Chen Restaurant Group had become the talk of the Pacific Northwest culinary scene. Margaret had quietly stepped back from her social obligations, citing health concerns. My catering company was now the most sought-after service in Seattle. And William? He became a regular at my new bistro, always ordering the sauce he grew up loving. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about forcing them to face the truth they've been denying all along. As for me, I finally had everything I'd worked for. Success, respect, and the satisfaction of knowing that every time Margaret Wellington craved her favorite restaurant's food, she'd have to swallow her pride along with it. Sometimes the sweetest victory isn't in the revenge itself. It's in the quiet moments afterward, when your enemies realize they've been wrong about you all along.